So welcome back to the second part of this video of Body Talk with Rachel. I'm here with Dr. Brown, Cook, and Perryman, and we're talking about body image concerns among Black women. If you are tuning in now and you didn't see the first part, I recommend you go back to the first part to hear introductions and all of the important information that was shared then. In this part, we're going to focus on the impact that these messages that we discussed in this first part have on Black women, and then aspects of Black culture that might be protective against some of these messages and perhaps some strategies. So to start it off, I think what really resonated in me from the first part is the high standards that are put on Black women of how they look, and also that there are aspects of appearance that are accepted and not accepted, and that seems like they would have a really strong impact on Black women. And I wanted to hear again, what ways in behaviors does this impact Black women?
I think I want to come back to a comment that Liz had made about sort of the exoticism of like the Kardashians with this sort of curvy figure. And anytime I think about that, how these sort of relatively, Black features are very much accepted on this family of white women, it makes me think about sort of the influx. And I don't know if you all like sort of know this, the influx of like Black women using waist trainers. And I remember when it started happening and just, with no discussion around the dangers of it, no discussion around the appropriate way of using them, no discussion around like also just being healthy for yourself. And I felt like a lot of it was related to this idea that, like these folks like the Kardashians were getting so much attention for having these figures that Black women have just had for years, but now it was sort of almost causing this exaggerated response, particularly around Black women and other women of color, to like utilize like these waist trainers to like cinch your waist in even more, as opposed to accepting sort of the natural curve of it. And so for me, I think that was something that really kind of stuck out to me in terms of the messages that are thrown around, because, and I thought it was just so, I was just so, I guess, blown away by it, because in my mind, Black women naturally have these sort of hourglass curvy figures, but this idea that something that is celebrated on these white women now causes Black women to almost have this exaggerated response to it. I don't know, what were your thoughts about that? But I remember when like this whole waist trainer movement, it's not a movement, it's problematic. This whole waist trainer thing started, and I remember going, like, we need to have better conversations around this, because this is not like the answer.
Yeah, I think connecting that to the ways in which this affects like Black women's behavior and all of that, I think oftentimes when these things come out, whether they're waist trainers or I imagine when relaxers became a thing, like there's often this exaggerated response in which Black women sort of flock to get whatever materials that they need in order to mimic, again, this sort of whitewashed exoticism. And I'm sure someone has done a study or looked at the statistics of the amount of money that Black women spend on beauty products. Which is not to say that, other women don't spend money on beauty products, but I've noticed that oftentimes the ways in which Black women spend money on beauty, it's used to emulate these certain standards of beauty, right? So even if we think about skin bleaching in Nigeria alone is $1 billion industry, right? So not making clothes or shoes or braiding hair, skin bleaching is $1 billion industry in Nigeria, right? So when we're talking about how these ideals affect Black women's behavior, it's really a lot of times Black women are spending money and time and energy on then trying to emulate these certain things. And we all know that skin bleaching is incredibly harmful to you, right? And there's maybe not enough discussion, because Black women haven't always been a part of the discussion about body image. There's not enough discussion of how things like that are, maybe just as harmful as some other like disordered eating behaviors and that sort of thing.
Even going back to the waist trainers, just think about all the different fads that we've seen come out. So right now it's the apple cider vinegar pills to help you lose all this weight. I have friends on Facebook that'll say, hey, the first 5 who want to try this new detox juice, you want to lose 20 pounds in like 5 days, I'll give it to you free. Just all these different, again, fads that people are flocking to, and they're doing, not even conducting any type of research to see, what are the ingredients? How is this going to affect my body? How is it going to impact the medications that I may be taking? Or this idea to go up under the knife, whether it's liposuction, enlarging your breast or your butt. And I will admit, I was absolutely like, okay, I'm going to get liposuction and we could just move some of the skin or fat from here and move it there. Then that will make me feel good. But then I had to think, like, who was I actually doing it for? Was it really to make me feel good, or was it to make me look more desirable for somebody else? And it breaks my heart to hear people, or to even see and experience people do these body altering things for the wrong reason. Like, the motivation is wrong. Like, if you want to get liposuction, do you? I am here for you to do whatever you choose to do, with your body, and I support you in that. But is your heart and mind in the right place when you make that choice? I think that's what gets to me the most.
And, I appreciate what both of you said in terms of, Liz, you said, Black women not being involved as much in the conversation around body image and body issues, because, Kiwana, when you talk about, we don't often have the conversation about, that Black women do go under the knife for some of these changes. And I am even thinking about, a teenager that I was talking to, and I remember we were just having this conversation, and then she said, like my nose. We were talking about something else, and she said, when I get older, I'm gonna have them thin my nose out. She said, because I have that Black girl nose with like the big nostrils. And I was just like, you are 14. You're 14. And then I said, there's a Black girl nose. Like, there were so many questions sort of just like rolling through my head that caught me so off guard, because like, when we talk about these things, we talk about these things as being predominantly like among white women. We don't talk about the fact that Black women and Black girls are also having these thoughts and having this conversation. And so we get left out of the conversations, we get left out of the research. And so then folks end up missing things. Clinicians end up missing things. Physicians end up missing things, because there's just this assumption that we don't have to think about Black women and Black girls and their body image and these issues, but we do. And it does come out in certain behaviors, and some behaviors that may not necessarily be as healthy or for their own self-care or self-love.
That emotional toll is something, the emotional toll that these things take is not something that's often been discussed. And what always pops up for me is the TLC song Unpretty, right? So TLC is one of the biggest to this day selling girl groups of all time. And when people, I think the general public, heard the song Unpretty, they're like, yeah, it's all about how we're all beautiful inside. And I'm like, but if you listen to it, like T-Boz, the Black woman who wrote it and the Black women who sung it, were specifically talking about things like, I need to buy my hair because it's not long enough, and I need to fix my nose because it's too big enough, and I believe T-Boz has sickle cell, so I don't like the way my skin looks because it doesn't have this glow, and if I'm going to be a Black girl, I need to have super even toned skin, right? And the whole song is really about this emotional toll that she feels not meeting these certain standards of what ideal Black woman beauty is. And so really, Black women are experiencing in some ways the same sort of distress that women of other ethnicities experience when we're talking about body image. So whether that's depression, whether it's anxiety, it's not talked about as much, it's not researched as much, but Black women have been saying it. People just haven't been listening.
And let's be honest, people haven't been listening because people expect Black women to just be strong and endure and make it through anything. So it's like, when we say this, it sort of goes ignored, and we're kind of silenced. So like, no, you don't have to worry about that because, you know, I remember friends saying Black girls are allowed to be bigger, so you don't have to worry about this. And I remember thinking, but no, I do think about these things. But again, because Black women are supposed to be able to leap tall buildings in a single jump, like we don't have to worry about them. And I think that's part of the issue in terms of us being left out of the research and left out of the conversation. Folks think that we don't have to worry about Black girls, they'll just be okay. But what if that's not real? Like, what if that's not the truth? Not what if, here's the reality, it's not the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier about, my pregnant body being my most comfortable body. But then there's also this idea of, the snapback. And you have all these famous women who have the money and the resources to get back to a size 0 or what have you 2 days after they had a baby. But for the rest of us that don't have those resources, there is a little bit more work and effort that has to go into it. But then the expectation from other people is that you return to your pre-pregnant body, almost immediately. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on women to do whatever they can to take the supplements or to do this, or to do that, so that they can get their body back. And there's a lot of mental, that's not the word I want to use. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that, a lot of anxiety that comes with that. And I'm not sure that we have really talked about that enough either.
Yeah, it sounds like there's an immense amount of pressure. And at the same time, like so much lacking support and help too. If there's no one, sharing this information, no resources directed specifically to Black women and these concerns, just a really harmful combination of pressure and lack of support and resources.
And this might be a little bit of a segue into a question that I believe we're going to talk about, but that's why it's so important when you're thinking about ways to resist these messages and resist this pressure. Part of the thing that always occurs to me is being intentional about the images you surround yourself with, right? And so, for example, I'm a nerd. I read a lot of fan fiction. It's important to me to read fan fiction written by Black women so that I don't see phrases like, he stared into your blue eyes and ran his fingers through your hair, right? Because I'm like, that's not a thing. It's not a thing for me and people who have hair like me. And so in the same ways, like I'm intentional about what I read and who I read it by. Like I always tell folks, you can curate your Instagram feed to be influencers that look like you. You're going to have to search for them. But this idea that beauty only looks a certain way is very much not true. You can choose not to read Cosmo and instead choose to read Essence magazine to see that like it's not only people of a certain skin tone or hair length that's beautiful. Like the intentionality around the images we see, I think goes a long way to resisting a lot of that pressure and being able to kind of renegotiate your own concept of like, what does beauty mean to me?
Yeah, but like you said, Liz, it's like you have to search for these things though. And I think that that's even more problematic, that even when I'm thinking about like the adolescent clients that I work with, like young Black girls, and we're trying to identify positive images for them, and they're like on Instagram and TikTok. I've never even like stepped a finger onto TikTok, don't know what's on there. But it's so difficult to find these like positive images out there because like the feeds get so flooded with these ideas of what Black women should look like, or what they do is they post like, this is what Black women should like, but this is the acceptable, exception. It's okay for Lizzo to be body positive because Lizzo can sing and Lizzo has money. But I'm like, there are folks who look like Lizzo walking the communities all around the blocks, and they are getting extended that same grace. So then it becomes, well, if I'm going to look like this, then I got to be really successful, so then no one can tell me anything. And so it's almost like even when we do have these very like body positive images in the Black community, they are seen as exceptions. and not the rule. Like Lizzo is an exception. She's not the rule. Yeah.
That's a really great point, that what Liz pointed out is being intentional about how we combat these messages, but that it's so challenging to do so. And that when you are catering your media, you're noticing that the people who are receiving this attention that might identify as Black women are maybe perceived as the exception rather than what an average person is experiencing. So that nicely segues into, other like thoughts about strategies that those who are suffering from body concerns could use. I know that there's this additional effort for being intentional in it. But if we kept that in mind of being intentional, what are some strategies people could use to improve their body satisfaction? It doesn't have to be an exhaustive list, just any ideas people have.
I think that really thinking about this idea of just overall health as opposed to like what my body looks like. And there have been a lot of folks that have been a part of this movement. I think of the group Black Girls Run, and just how involved they've been in this movement. And there's another group, and why can't I think about it right now? It's a group of Black women who arrange like walks. And now I want to like pick up my phone and go to my Facebook feed because I follow them. But
Girls
like,
Trek.
yes,
Girls Trek.
yeah, Girl Trek. And like they do these things where it's like just about being healthy and getting outside and being around other Black women. And they show you images of Black women running and walking of all body types and sizes, and just like, and they make it about connection and sisterhood. And I think that is such a good thing and a good way to sort of introduce like healthy body image. And not only that, they are women of all shades, they're women of all hair types. And so, when I think about like what Black girls are exposed to, like I want them to be more exposed to those things. This idea that you get out and you walk because it's just good, it's mentally healthy for you, and it's an opportunity for you to connect with another Black woman who looks like you or doesn't look like you. And I feel like that can be a really helpful thing. So when I think about like curating the perfect Instagram feed or Facebook page, I think about like groups like that, like Girl Trek, like Black Girls Run, that really sort of hit at like just being overall healthy and not making it about body, but really thinking about like mental and physical health.
Yeah, I love that point of connection too, like establishing connection as support, and the health components along with that of connection, but also walking too.
Absolutely. I think, having other Black women that you can look to for support, for validation, for empowerment is incredibly important. And to me, I see a component of that as taking sort of this like preemptive protective stance. So when we think about, messages like you're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as far, what our parents were trying to communicate to us was like, you're going to have to work hard. A lot of times it's talking about academics, right? Because this world wasn't built for you. Right? This world was built for cishet rich white men. And because you are not those things, you are going to have to work differently. And while in some ways that can be a depressing thought, I think it can also be a freeing thought of, okay, well, if this world wasn't designed for me anyway, then these beauty ideals don't apply to me. Like they were never going to apply to me because they weren't designed for me. And I think in some ways that can also free you up to create your own narrative of what is important to me. So things like beauty is health, beauty is me feeling good and making sure that I'm taking care of myself, and not necessarily like how many inches my hair is, things like that. And so I know it takes a different level of sort of, I guess, mental thought and thought process and maturity to have that narrative of, okay, this world wasn't created for me. But I think it's something that Black people are taught from an early age. And so it's just a matter of capitalizing on that. Like, okay, the world wasn't work for you, so you're going to have to work hard in school, but the world wasn't made for you. And therefore, you're also going to have to create your own image of beauty.
Yeah, and I think I would just say, attitude is everything, and focusing on how you feel instead of how you look. And of course, that's easier said than done. But doing the things that bring you joy. And if it just so happens to be exercise or, raise your heart rate a little bit, then so be it. Like I absolutely enjoy working out. I more so enjoy working out when I don't know that I'm exercising. So that's even better. But again, just focusing on how you feel on the inside, and that will absolutely shine through on the outside.
I love that. Like, what brings you joy? Lead with that. Sorry, Dr. Brown, go ahead.
No. I was going to say though, but I think another important thing to consider, and I think it relates to what you were saying, Liz, and also to what you were saying earlier, Kiwana, is that we also have to start to create a space where Black girls and women can scrutinize some of these messages that we've heard, right? And scrutinize them and identify which ones work for us, which ones don't, which ones we might have to make some adjustment to. And I think that also is extremely important because I feel like, gone are the days when I have to just do what my grandmother told me to do. Though, don't get me wrong, sometimes I'm just like, how would my grandmother respond to this? But then I remember that I am in a space that I've created a space for myself where I allow myself to scrutinize some of these messages and really question, is this something that fits for me? Is this something that works for me? And trying to understand where this message came from and if it's still serving me, maybe in the ways that I thought it used to. Because I've recognized even for myself that some of those messages, while yes, I feel like holding on to them, I got through my grad school interviews with my straight hair and then went back and got through my job interviews with my straight hair and then came back. Now I'm just like, that just doesn't serve me anymore. And so, if you're going to take me, you're going to take me as who I am, because I promise you after that interview, I'm going to show up just like this. So we might as well get used to it now. So I think that it's important to create a space again where Black girls and women can also just really sort of re-examine and scrutinize some of these messages and figure out if these things are still serving them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, placing the ownership on Black women to scrutinize and critique what messages aren't serving them and how they can change the script in that way.
And if I'm going to, be the therapist I am for a second, I think it's also important to engage in that like cognitive restructuring for yourself, right? And so if someone was dealing with anxiety, we would tell them when you have an anxious thought that pops up, maybe that's a point where you can say, okay, is this really true? Is everybody really going to laugh at me if, this thing happens? You can use those same thoughts for ideals that don't serve you. So when you find yourself saying like, oh, but I don't have good hair, that's a point for you to correct yourself and say, healthy hair is good hair. Like good hair is not having loose curls. My hair is good as long as I'm taking care of it, right? So you can engage in those same sort of cognitive restructuring that you would do for any other negative thought or unhelpful thought.
I love that. What great strategies collectively. So I just want to, leave space. Is there anything that we, didn't talk about or additional strategies either of you have that would be helpful to include?
I mean, I think the only thing that I'll add is that, there has been some research out there that sort of talks to, if we're going to talk about like Black women's body image, and I think we've covered like some of the big ones like body shape and hair and skin color. I know that there's also been some work out there that says that there's also this element of what I want to say, like attitude or like just sort of like how Black women present themselves that factors into this body image issue and concerns and considerations when talking about body image with Black women. Because, I sort of come back to this idea of Lizzo, and people talk about, the self-confidence that Lizzo has. But here's the thing that happens, right? So Lizzo shows up with this self-confidence, talks about how much she loves her body, and then someone finds out she's drinking a smoothie. And I remember like folks were like, oh, Lizzo is not confident in her body anymore. And it was just like, she's like, no, I'm still confident in my body. Can I like also put something healthy in there? Like that's okay too. So even sort of how folks think about like the just the way that Black women present themselves and the perceptions, even stereotypes that go along with that, that influence how Black women think about their bodies, I think might be something important for folks to consider.
Yeah, that's a really great point to add. Yeah, thank you so much, all of you. Any other last comments before we wrap up? Okay, well, awesome. Thanks so much, all of you. I really enjoyed this discussion and really appreciate all the time and effort involved in having this conversation. So those watching, please check out more Body Talk with Rachel videos.